Hey, all you podcast listeners, you can find Slice of the Paranormal everywhere podcasts are found, or you can watch us on our YouTube channel.
Hey, hi, hello there, and welcome to Slice of the Paranormal. I'm Ryan, these are my friends Christy and Steve. How you guys been? I know it's been a week since I seen you. How you been?
I've been doing pretty good. How about you? You just got back from what, Seattle?
I took a little trip to Seattle.
Where else you were in?
We went up to British Columbia. Victoria. We took a ferry into Victoria and up into Vancouver as well, which was a lot of fun. It was beautiful. It's actually cool because the whole time, now my girlfriend, she slept. She wanted to sleep on the ferry. That's her way. Me, my eyes are peeled the whole time for whatever I can see. I'm hoping for whales. I'm hoping for dolphins or seals or or Bigfoots or Loch Ness monster or whatever I might see.
Sasquatch
You never
country
know.
up there.
It really is.
Yeah.
You are not joking. Like all their merch is like Bigfoot stuff. Like everywhere you go, especially in Seattle, is like in Vancouver, is Bigfoot is their thing. Mm-hmm. So I didn't realize it was so big up there. Did you know about that?
I mean, I knew about the Bigfoot and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm always a little bit more into the paranormal.
More of that side of it.
More that side, yeah.
Well, I like the Bigfoot stuff too, so it was pretty cool.
I kind of think they're all related. I mean, the Bigfoots and the aliens and all that. It could all be paranormal.
Definitely.
I always say I believe in everything and anything, whatever it is.
Or maybe nothing.
Or nothing. I believe in all that. It was cool though.
Just
It was a lot of fun.
nihilist here.
We did a haunted tour up there to they call it the Booze and Booze, and booze. One of them is the alcohol booze. You get it? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
But our tour guide was. I'm not trying to make he did all right. He did okay. I feel like a little bit more enthusiasm out of a tour guide could have gone a long way.
Yeah.
He was not a bad guy. I'm not trying to say that. I just felt like it was a different experience and a different tour we did. But it was just really just walking around while he talked about not ghosts but dead people. Like he's like, and then Kurt Cobain died in Seattle, and we're like, yeah, is there a ghost something related to this? And he's like, he didn't answer any of my questions either, which is another part that upset me. I don't know if he didn't have time to or just kind of didn't want to answer my questions, but some of the things he said, I was just kind of like intrigued, and I asked, and I just moved on.
Some people, when they're going off a script, once you can't deviate from the script, or they completely lose where they're at.
I could, you know what?
I
hope I'm going with that because I can totally understand that.
Because I know, like, I give tours, and when I do, like, if people ask questions, people are like, oh my God, I forget where I was on the tour. It's like, well, you just look around and then let your mind roll.
Yeah, fair enough. That makes a lot of sense.
And that's how I help people to get over that. But if they're not comfortable with the subject matter, if he's a new tour guide, I could see how he'd get befuddled.
He seemed, I don't know. Well, like I said,
my question is, what kind of booze were on this tour?
Any booze you pay for. Any booze
so
you would like to
included.
buy yourself. Yeah, it was not included on the tour.
That kind of goes with the name. You'd think it would be included.
It's like walk for a block or two, stop at a bar. Walk for half a block, stop at a bar.
I see.
And honestly, we could have just gone to the bars and drank, and he could have just told us stories. I think that would have been cool. I think personally that would have, whatever. I don't want to complain about it. It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
That's awesome, though.
What was the weather like?
Beautiful. I must have picked the best week ever. It was gorgeous. It was like 75, 80 degrees every day, sunny. We had the one day we went on the ferry, it was a bit foggy, but that's about it. But anyway, that's enough about me. Sorry.
That's all right.
It was fun though. Yeah, Seattle.
Never been that way. I want to.
But today we're actually talking about what?
Today we're going to be talking about the Joseph Priestley House here in Northumberland. Now, for those that don't know where Northumberland is, we're about 55 miles north of Harrisburg.
Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania. So if you follow the Susquehanna River up through the state, it's going to fork, and right there at the fork, that is Northumberland, Pennsylvania. So very easy to find for those of you that have never been there. Now, Joseph Priestley, he's kind of a lesser-known person. Not many people know who he is. But he's actually a Unitarian minister from England. He was born in 1733, and this guy actually riles up a lot of people over there in England. So he's living in Birmingham, England in 1791. And
You said Joseph Priestley.
Joseph Priestley, Dr. Joseph
I keep
Priestley.
going Jason Priestley.
And well, that's 90210.
That's a whole different.
Yeah,
Totally different guy.
Totally different guy.
But, you know.
But also, what's a Unitarian?
Okay, a Unitarian in Priestley's day is a guy that he believes that he's a rational Christian.
Okay.
So he takes the Bible and he's like, oh, this is junk. This doesn't belong. Like the parting of the Red Sea, or he thought these stories were parables and moral lessons. So he was trying to get to the roots of Jesus' message. So he didn't believe in things like the Trinity. He didn't believe that Jesus Christ was divine. So obviously that puts him at odds with a
So is
ton
he
of people.
scratching out like parts of it? He's like, this part doesn't exist.
He's got his highlighter. He's just highlighting
Essentially,
the good parts.
like his good friend Thomas Jefferson actually writes the Jeffersonian Bible,
Yeah, that I heard
which
of.
is essentially cutting out all the stuff that Priestley would cut out, and being like, "This is what I believe."
Oh, so they're good friends. So they're talking.
Oh
about
yeah,
this
they're
stuff.
super close.
Okay.
Now, is that why his church is so small that's out here? Because he took like
his
all
church-
the little bits of Christianity. And
His church-
it's a tiny church.
His church is so small because when he
It's
comes
tiny.
here, he actually comes here because they burned him out of his home in Birmingham, England in 1791.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
So they burned him out of his home, and he, flees to London, and he tries to get money back because the local magistrates were kind of like, "Oh, you guys are doing the good work, for the
Okay.
government. We'll just let you go." And he finally gets money, and he travels to America here in Pennsylvania. And he decides, I'm not going to settle in New York. I'm not going to settle in Philadelphia. It's dirty. They just had the yellow fever epidemic. Thousands of people died, and that's...
So he was friends with Ben Franklin, too.
He was actually Ben Franklin's dearest friend.
Yeah.
And when Ben Franklin's in London and he's going to get arrested, Ben Franklin's like, I cancel all my meetings and I'm going to hang out with Dr. Joseph Priestley for the day. And they're essentially just sitting there on Craven Street reading. And if you ever look into Craven Street, that's got some dark history too. I mean, they just recently...
Craven Street where?
In London.
England? Okay.
And when they were digging in the basement, they found dozens of skeletons of people. So there were all these...
Wait. Yeah. So go ahead.
Wait, they're just
So
in this
there's-
house they're reading at
in Benjamin Franklin's house, there was tons of skeletons. And here he was, sharing the house with a doctor, and they were doing dissections in the basement.
Yeah.
So what do you do with the bodies? You just dig a hole and throw it in.
nice.
I'm sure it smelled great.
Like
but-
much of England, I think, back then.
But ultimately, Priestley comes and he settles here in Northumberland, which is the middle of freaking nowhere.
Strange.
So people are like, why is he staying here? And it's because he had 3 sons that were trying to sell land up in Loyalsock region, and they had settled here. So his wife's like, let's move here. So they build this house in the middle of nowhere. It's a gorgeous home. It's got a vista. It's facing the river. And he technically only lives there for maybe 10 years of his life. All his scientific discoveries are done over in England. He's most famously known for isolating oxygen in 1774. This is actually the year of the 250th anniversary of the discovery of oxygen.
Discovered oxygen.
He discovered oxygen. It was obviously
he's
around
credited with discovering
He
it,
invented
right?
it.
Yeah,
There's
well,
the other guy.
he's the first guy that isolates it. So
He's the guy that actually published it. right?
obviously, before Priestley, people were still breathing oxygen, so there's no fear of that. But
And he didn't call it oxygen either. It was something like something dated air.
It dephlogisticated
That's
air.
it. That's it.
He was going.
Why we don't have to call it
There's no
that?
farts in that.
He was
air.
going off an old
What?
dephlogisticated air. He believed that there was this phlogiston substance.
Why do you know that?
I'm actually a tour guide at the Joseph Priestley House, and
This is your bread and butter.
I do this actually for fun. I don't get paid for it. I like to give tours, and I'm a nerd, and I know a lot of stuff. So
Thanks for sharing.
yeah, you would have never figured it out just by the glasses. So I've been doing that since about 2000. So I'm really connected to the site.
Okay. Awesome.
So I've been giving tours of the site for a lot of years. My wife actually also was a tour guide there. And I actually had a paranormal experience at the house, which is hilarious because
At the Priestley House.
at the Priestley House, because Dr. Priestley believes that when he dies, he's going to be in the grave until the morning of the resurrection. He's not going to be a ghost. In fact, I think the guy, if he was a ghost, would sit in his grave to avoid being wrong on a topic.
Just to prove a point.
Just to prove a point. I mean, this guy kept this false theory of phlogiston his entire life. It would not let go of it. And the chemistry system we all use is what he would call the New French system.
Okay.
And, which led to the periodic table of elements, and that's what we all know. That system was...
And was there an old French system?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there was, but Priestley's going off the system of phlogiston. So all his beliefs on gases are literally about this or surrounding this phlogiston system.
Yeah.
In fact, even Dr. Benjamin Franklin actually wrote a pamphlet on airs. He wrote a pamphlet on farting. And he's like, well, who am I going to share this with? I'm going to share it with Dr. Priestley because he's all about airs.
Yep. I
So,
like it. And gases, right?
And gases, yeah. So it was odd that that I hadn't experienced there. I'm a very rational person. I look for the normal.
You like to debunk stuff.
I like
too.
to debunk things. So one day in about, I think it was around 2003, I was at the site, and my future wife was in the visitor center, and I was in the house, and our job when we're not giving a tour is to clean the house. So I'm in the center hallway, and I'm cleaning the house, and I start hearing footsteps above me. Now, I know I'm the only person in this house because there's bells on every door.
You're positive.
I'm positive because, there's bells, so we know where everyone's at. Because when you're in that house and you're giving a tour, you're not only giving a tour, you're guarding all the priceless heirlooms that are in the building.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? So
Sure.
there's bells for each of the doors, so you know exactly where everyone's placement is. Even if I'm saying in the kitchen, and the site administrator would walk in from the front door, I'd be able to hear her and know that without ever talking or breaking character.
Okay.
So I'm in the house, and I hear these footsteps in the master bedroom, and I heard them for about 20 minutes.
What,
And
just like back and forth? Or?
just walking upstairs. Now, in the 17th century, you have to imagine, women occupied the second floor during the day, men occupied the first floor. Women were, not heard, they
not
kind of
seen, not heard.
not seen,
Just
not heard.
Get out of here, woman.
But being the big brave
Get
man I
upstairs where
am,
you belong.
I just stood there frozen,
Down here again?
and the footsteps started coming down the steps.
Then no bell.
No bell. Towards where I'm at. So I'm literally facing the steps, and I sent you a picture that shows the staircase and my vantage point in the Priestley House. So I'm with my back to the front door, which is facing the river, and I'm looking at the staircase. And I could hear these footsteps coming towards me.
That's pretty cool. Nothing ever appeared, or...
Well, actually, here's where I become extremely brave.
Sorry, I didn't mean
When
to
they
laugh
started,
when you said that.
when they started coming down the steps, and I heard the first 3 steps, I bolted out to the visitor
Yeah,
center.
that's what I would do.
To be with the 110-pound blonde in the visitor center, like she's gonna protect me.
Yeah, save me.
Save me. And I never saw anything. Now, what I know of the history is Elizabeth, who occupied that room, was Dr. Priestley's daughter-in-law. He was very fond of her. And she moves back to England in 1811, and she dies in 1816 of cancer. So she lived the last few vital years of her life in the middle of nowhere, Northumberland, and stuck to that room.
Wait, in 1816 or 1916?
1816.
1816. Wow.
Dr. Priestley dies in 1804.
That's right.
And then
Okay.
the family, his son stays living in the house with his wife and children.
Wow.
And when it gets to around 1811, they're like, hey, we're not American citizens. The War of 1812 is approaching. And American sentiment towards the British is not good. So like, we should probably get back home. So they go back home, and they end up immigrating over to England, and they never come back to the house.
Okay.
So I think that the ghost that I was being haunted by was actually Elizabeth. But there's other ghostly activity at this house. So I looked into the history of the house, like what other paranormal stuff has happened. The site has doors that would open and close by themselves.
Okay.
And all officially, that was taken care of in the 1960s when they get rid of the Victorian hinges of the house. That problem goes away. And I thought that the problem was going away because they were spring-loaded hinges.
Oh.
But we had a tour guide, or actually a board member this year, who was giving a tour of the house, and he left the front door open, and the door slammed shut while he was standing there talking. And there's no wind moving around inside the house. I mean, we don't even have air conditioning in that place. So
it was only temporarily solved.
Ghosts seem to love to close doors.
They do.
Open doors. That's like one of their favorite pastimes.
kind of like letting their presence be known through footsteps or knocking.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure.
Close a good door, though.
I'm not sure if that's debunked anymore. And then there's another story where, like, servants would have a problem when they'd take a candle and they'd walk into the basement. They'd get to the third step down, and the candle would snuff out on the third step every time. Once they redid the ductwork in the house, that candle stopped getting snuffed out, and
It was just a breeze.
It was just a breeze.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, if you're a person in the 1800s walking with a candle and the candle's snuffing out on the third step,
Every time. Sure.
you're gonna be a little freaked out.
Sure.
Now the other story,
It's a fun story. I like that.
I like the candle story. I wish it still happened. We're not allowed to have open flames in the museum, otherwise they would try this. Now the other story is the neighbors on Priestley Avenue would see lights moving about the house through the windows. And the PHMC always said that it was probably the Mule Packet Boys. There used to be a canal that ran through the yard. It cut it in half. Today there's some railroad tracks. But the Mule Packet Boys would be walking mules who were dragging the packet boats, and they had a lantern. So the theory was that maybe it was the lantern that's casting light through the house, and that was what people on the other side of the home were seeing.
Okay, and what's a packet boat?
It's a boat that could transport goods along the canal or people, and they would be
Pulled by
guided
it.
through it instead of taking like the small boat on a dangerous river that could possibly, get swept away.
Right.
So your canal system was a safer way to transport goods usually. So those were the things that I've heard about. Now, there's also a tour guide that said that he experienced an unseen force trying to push him over a banister
While he was at the Priestley House?
while he was at the Joseph Priestley House. So,
I get that ghost all the time. He's trying to push me over the banister.
yeah, me too, usually when I'm drinking, like, oh. But, so I did some studying. I was like, well, I wanted to know what Priestley thought of ghosts, because I know that he wouldn't want to be a ghost. But, like, during his life...
He looks like a ghost. So, like,
oh, yeah, we have a picture of
creepy-looking
him
guy.
if people don't know what he looks like. But the Priestley, has written over 200 books in his lifetime. So one of the things he writes in 1791, the same
That's
year...
a lot of books.
The same year he gets kicked out of the Birmingham, where they burned down his house, he actually publishes the writings and letters of John Wesley. Do you know who John Wesley is?
The name sounds...
yeah, it sounds familiar.
He's the guy that created Methodist.
Oh,
Okay, so
Okay.
John Wesley's the Methodist, and his mother is sometimes referred to as the mother of Methodism. So they didn't like
catchy
each other.
title.
These guys didn't like each other.
She started it. She's like, you can just call me the
mother Methodist.
You got Priestley, who doesn't believe in ghosts, and you have John Wesley, who's like, well, there's witches and ghosts in the Bible, so if I don't believe in them, then how can I believe the Bible? Is his logic. Now, Priestley's a logical guy. He's like, no, ghosts don't exist. So they really don't get along.
Let me show you my version of the Bible real quick. See, here's the problem.
Yeah.
So I did give you a picture of Susanna Wesley and Reverend Okay, her husband, Reverend Samuel Wesley. Now, before Priestley's even born, in the year of 1716 and 1717, the Wesleys are living in Epworth Rectory because he's also a minister. And through the letters of the family, we learn that there was a poltergeist activity. This is the most written about poltergeist activity in Britain history.
Okay. To this date.
For the time period, this
Okay.
is one of the oldest ones.
All right, that makes sense.
That is well documented.
Okay.
Because
being old.
You have over a dozen letters that are talking about the phenomenon that happened in this house. And Priestley being anti-John Wesley and John Wesley being anti-Priestley, after John Wesley dies, Priestley publishes all the letters of the family, and he talks about the Epworth Rectory poltergeist.
Oh.
So he, let me just say what kind of family that they were having. Susanna Wesley had 19 kids. Imagine that. Okay, so her husband
That'd
kept
be
her
horrible.
pretty freaking busy.
Is this the mother?
This is the mother. This is John Wesley's
You
mom.
have 19 kids. You deserve to be called the mother.
The mother.
Yeah.
That's why she's the mother of Methodism.
Yeah.
And her and her husband, Samuel, were having an argument because during prayer, he would pray to King William III, and she wouldn't pray to King William because he was Dutch and she was English, and she thought that was horrible.
It is horrible.
They had a fight, and Samuel Wesley's like, well, if you're not going to pray to the king, I'm moving. I'm not living with you. I'm not cohabitating. So he leaves the house, and then he comes back like a year later. Now, right around the time that he comes back to this house, if you're his wife, you can imagine you're kind of pissed off at this guy. You're not very happy with Reverend Samuel.
Yeah, a lot of pissed off.
So the ghostly activity starts happening in this house when they start hearing knocking. Like,
Wait, this isn't the rectory. This is that guy's house, right?
This is not the Joseph Priestley house. This is Epworth Rectory. Yes.
Okay.
So they start hearing a knock, which is 3 knocks on the door. They think, and it's got this groaning sound. They think it's this neighbor, Mr. Turpin, who's dying, and they keep going to the door, and no one's there. So at this house, they start hearing footsteps in the upstairs. The dog is cowering. They had a mastiff dog that was cowering in a corner, and this happens for about a month long. Now, John Wesley never saw this. Him and his brothers, they're at school.
Okay.
So when Priestley writes about this, here's what Priestley says. He says that he was convinced it was a trick of the family servants and neighbors for their amusement. So he discounts it. He's like,
People were in cahoots doing this.
people are in cahoots. People didn't like Priestley in his
Blame
life.
the servants.
So he assumes people don't like the Wesleys either for their religious beliefs.
Just messing with them.
So he thought people were messing with them because not many years earlier, their house burned down, and one of the things people thought was it might be the neighbors. They want to get rid of the Wesleys.
Oh.
So Dr. Priestley had some friends, a guy named Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Robert Southey. These guys are literary guys, also writers, and they wanted to actually create a pantasocracy, which is essentially a utopian society here in Northumberland. Pantasocracy.
It's a leader of pants.
Well, they thought that because Priestley lives here in Norrie, we want to create a pantasocracy or a utopian society to be built around Dr. Priestley.
Okay.
Because they thought it'd be a great place for open religious thoughts and,
And pantasocracy.
No,
and
we got-
pantasocracy, whatever that is with pants or whatever.
Now, are you going to get
dang.
back to why is the church so small? Because I'm still really wondering that.
Well, the church is so small because there's very few people in Norrie that are Unitarians.
See, you're right.
His followers actually worshipped in the house, in the
Yeah.
drawing room. So it
I
wasn't.
don't think it's as big as this room we're in.
It's actually a little bit smaller. And
Yeah.
when he dies, that church is not even built. That church is built by his grandson and the followers of Priestley
Yeah.
who were still in Northumberland. So that comes at a later date.
Wow.
So it's Joseph Rayner Priestley that has that built.
Oh, okay.
So
JRP.
when Samuel Taylor Coleridge, he writes about it, he's like, I believe it's a case of a phenomenon that might have been a contagious hallucination caused by eating yeast-infected grain, which is a pretty forward-thinking thing to think. I mean, that's what they think might have started these Salem witch trials. You know, yeast-infected grain might have made mass hysteria.
Didn't they do that to the Vikings too? To each
they
other?
had the blue paint.
Yeah.
That was made with magic mushrooms.
Right.
Now, Robert Southey was the guy that thinks, well, I think it was supernatural. So Robert Southey, you know, he takes the John Wesley side. But the whole rectory thing is discounted by Dr. Priestley. So that I use that as my proof that Dr. Priestley does not really believe in ghosts.
He's not a believer, yeah.
No matter what, he's gonna say, nah.
Yeah,
not paranormal. Like
he could
basically see a ghost.
He's an unbeliever. So to think that his house
that's not real
has some possible hauntings, which you know have never been validated or proved. But then I did some more digging. I mentioned that he isolates oxygen in 1774. Now he's living in a place called Bowood Mansion. Bowood Mansion is the home of a guy named Lord Shelburne, and he's part of the English, Parliament.
Okay.
And he's a really big wig. So Priestley's living there, acting as his librarian. He was essentially the guy that was like, "This is a book you should read," and picking out books. He's also acting as his tutor for his kids. So he was designing what his kids were taught, and a guy named Jervis, I think it was the actual tutor that taught the young boys. And so he's living in the house in he stayed there from 1773 to about 1780. Now, the interesting thing I find is one of Lord Shelburne's kids dies in 1778. It's a guy named William Petty is his son. His full name is William Granville Petty. And William Granville Petty was out riding in the cold December night, December or early January, and he caught a cold. And he goes to sleep one night, and he dreams that he is lying in the back of a carriage being taken to a church while he's sick. And while he's laying there, he can see the black procession behind him, but he can't sit up. And he wakes up, and he goes to Dr. Priestley, and he tells him that he had this dream, and he thinks he was attending his own funeral. Yeah. So Dr. Priestley's like, nah.
Well, that's a common thing, though, right?
Oh, yeah. We all dream about our own funeral. I mean, like Abraham Lincoln,
I hear that a lot. Like the day before, like you're thinking about
Abraham Lincoln supposedly thought that. So Priestley's like, of course it's the fever-induced that made you dream this. So he calls Dr. Aslop, which is the family doctor.
Aslop?
Yes, I know.
Nice.
It sounds horrible, right?
Wouldn't you love to have that name growing up?
No way. He didn't even slow down. He just said Dr. Aslop and moved on.
Yeah, like we're not even going to mention. We're just going to slide right past that.
This is the tour guide in me.
Yeah, I feel it.
So Dr. Aslop comes, and he diagnoses him as having a cold, and he's like, rest a few days. And the boy is confined in his room, and he's resting. And he recovered sufficiently so that the next time Dr. Aslop gets there,
it's not gonna not be funny. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Every time
I changed the name if I could.
Dr. A. You can say Dr. A.
Aslop,
I'm
like-
still gonna be. Yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm
Licking it
a
off
child.
the
No. So Dr. Aslop says, you can leave your room, just don't leave the house. I mean, imagine it's January, there's snow on the ground. He's telling the kid, just don't leave the house. It's cold outside.
Okay.
Sure thing, Dr. Aslop.
So the next day, right after he tells this young boy, William Petty, don't leave your house, Dr. Aslop is doing his rounds, back in the day when doctors, actually did house calls. And he is riding past Bowood House. And William Petty is running in the yard. And he's running up to him. And Dr. Aslop goes to yell at him to get back in the house, and the boy vanishes before his very eyes. So he goes into the house to scold this boy for being outside in the middle.
Even though he just disappeared.
How
in
dare
front
you
of his
disappear in
eyes.
front of my very eyes?
Well, I mean, he thought that the kid was hiding from him for disobeying his orders.
Makes more sense.
You know, he doesn't think that it's a ghost. But when he gets in the house, he is quickly told that William Petty has died just a few minutes ago. So he obviously never left the house. So Dr. Priestley is directly related to, you know, debunking one ghost and then also having the Bowood house ghost that he's directly involved in the story. Now, the story is recorded by a girl named Mary Ann. I can't even pronounce her last name.
Just say Aslop.
We'll call her Aslop. It's Schimmel Pennick or something like that.
Schimmel Pennick hyphen
Who
Aslop.
lived from 1778 to 1856. And it was actually repeated in a book called The Haunted Homes and Family Traditions of Great Britain by John Ingram, which was published in 1897 at like the height of spiritualism.
Yeah,
It's just interesting that this William Petty kid actually foretold his own death, and he actually is buried at the family church at High Wycombe, which is where he dreamt he was being buried.
So, yeah.
It's the family grave, so.
That's cool.
So who else could be haunting Priestley House here?
What other,
Could Priestley himself be haunting the house?
I honestly don't think so. Priestley did die in that home.
Oh, did he?
He died in the library in 1804. Supposedly, he was dictating his last work.
Okay.
And his last words were something to the effect of, "That is it. It is done." And then he dies.
Fitting.
And when the people that were sitting with him, which are his son and a guy named Thomas Cooper, they said he passed away so peacefully, you could hardly tell he had died because he was laying on a daybed and he just kind of calmly just died.
That's the way to go.
But
Can you imagine though if he like woke up from dying and realized he was a ghost? Like after all these years of like ghosts don't exist.
But
You're crazy.
Oh, that would be like the best.
And now I'm a ghost.
But you mentioned like, could it be someone else? There are two other deaths of the Priestleys in his lifetime here in Northumberland. His youngest son, Henry, who's also known as Harry, is buried here in town. He died while working on his cabin outside of town. And when he died, no one would let them bury him in the cemeteries. Because if you imagine the late 1700s...
Yeah, why would that be?
all the graveyards were connected to churches. There was no Unitarian church. Hence, there was no Unitarian graveyard.
Baby, graveyard, too.
So Norrie had a
Tiny
ton of
graveyard.
these little mini graveyards of all the denominations of churches. So when Henry dies, the family is forced to keep him in the basement, lying in stasis until they can find a place to bury him. And it's the Haynes family that's like, all right, we'll let you bury him in the Quaker Green. So he was originally buried along King Street, near the King Street Park.
Oh.
And Mary Priestley, Dr. Priestley's wife, is a very sickly woman. And the son dies in 1796, and she dies in 1797, like a few months later.
Okay.
So both of those people are buried in the Quaker Green. Now, we don't have a Quaker Green here today because in the Joseph Rayner Priestley, Dr. Priestley's grandson, moves back to Norrie, and he's part of the cemetery commission that's like, hey, we got a ton of these graveyards all around town. Why don't we dig them up and make a centralized graveyard?
Sounds like fun.
So the Riverview Cemetery is brought into fruition.
Hey, you guys, I've been thinking about digging graves.
Yeah.
Just
Sounds
all
like
of
a
them.
good idea.
Can we just dig them all up?
Like we have all these little ones.
And make a big one.
Yeah,
do
just
it.
one massive one. That won't do anything.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, it was because of space. You have all these graves in prime real estate in the center of town. So Riverview Cemetery, when they built that, was on the edge of town.
Sure.
You know,
I just feel like people back then in the day were just so much more willing to just dig up bodies and move them than they are now. Like,
or what, anything.
yeah, like they would just.
I get that
let's
it
move
makes
a
sense. They're just
cemetery.
like, yeah.
well, and but if you watch Poltergeist,
yeah.
think about that. Like, there are so many graves that when they dig these people up, there was nothing left of them. So I'm of the opinion that not everyone in Norrie made it to the cemetery.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you go to the cemetery today, you'll see like 50 headstones that are real close together next to the main building. And I'm of the opinion that those are the people that they didn't find the bodies.
Right.
So those are the people that their bodies are
They're not worried about spacing.
They're around town.
Yeah.
You know, there's people when I'd be at the Priestley House, so people would come and they'd be like, hey, I was digging in my yard, you know, making a garden, and I found a headstone. I'm not surprised by this.
Just glad you didn't find a head.
Yeah. I mean, you could here in this town, because there are random graves that are probably still strewn about.
I know Joseph Priestley is very important. I think it's funny because I've learned more about him through you. But until recently in my life, I had no idea that he was like such an important person in just the U.S. history. You know.
Yeah, people think of him as solely a scientist, and really he was a minister. He works with. He's very dear friends with Thomas Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson said he believes that he's the most intelligent man in America at the time that he's living here.
Yeah, that's just crazy.
And it's actually,
nobody knows his name, but we know everyone else.
And you know what? His last name was spelled wrong on the elementary school up here in Northumberland.
Oh, for real?
For real.
Oh, yeah, they do that a lot. In fact, I bought a stamper that the Penn State had made so that when you came to the Priestley House, they'd stamp to say that you were there.
Yeah.
And they misspelled
Jason Priestley?
Jason Priestley. With
Jayson.
They take away the last E. So it's usually Priestley without an E. It's,
that stinks.
Everyone screws it up. So
that's funny.
But he was very influential. In fact, some people believe that he wrote a book called Letters to the Inhabitants of Northumberland in 1800, and it actually cost John Adams the 1800 election and won the election for Thomas Jefferson.
Oh.
Wow.
So like
that is huge.
So it upsets John Adams so much that he literally stops talking to Thomas Jefferson for like 30 years. And they finally, after, so many years of not talking, they start talking to each other. And there's like 172 letters between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, and they're all saved. And
that sounds like a lot to us, but that's all they did back then, was write letters back and forth.
It is, but
call each other.
My dearest.
Yeah.
But when you think about Priestley, and people are thinking that, okay, Benjamin Franklin, how many times do you think in those 172 letters they mentioned Benjamin Franklin? They probably mentioned him like 5 times.
Oh, really?
Now, George Washington, how many times do you think they mentioned him?
Couple?
Twice?
Like 3 times. How many times do you think they mentioned Dr. Priestley?
429.
Like 43 times.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
He is the main topic of a lot of their conversations because he was so influential to both these men.
Yeah.
So why don't people care about him? Like, why don't we know that name?
We don't know about Priestley because he is a rabble rouser. They looked at him as a dangerous person.
He's British too, I guess.
He's British,
that might be why they didn't tell us in history class.
But if you're a Methodist and you have a Methodist hymnal, there's actually John Wesley wrote an anti-Unitarian hymn to add to the hymnal for Methodist.
I was raised Methodist, and now that you're saying like Wesley, like Wesleyan Church, like I remember seeing that. So growing up,
like they really hated each other. I mean, you really got to hate someone if you're like writing hymns about your God, that you're gonna like talk about how horrible Unitarians are.
Yeah.
In your hymnal.
It's pretty awesome, actually.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to, get to the level where they're writing hymns against me. But you can actually still go to that Epworth Rectory. And in fact, the kids called the ghost Old Jeffrey.
Is that the Bowood one?
No, that's Epworth Rectory. That would be...
Oh, that's the Aslop one.
Yeah, when you're talking Bowood, you're talking Aslop. Oh, that's horrible. Wood and Aslop, I never saw the connection.
Nice job.
But I could talk about Dr. Priestley like a number of ways, because he's very influential in our country. And like when the Declaration of Independence is being written by people like Thomas Jefferson, they're actually reading books like Dr. Joseph Priestley's First Principles of Government, Thomas Paine's Common Sense.
Yeah.
I mean, he's very influential. In fact, if you went to college at all, the American liberal arts curriculum was designed by Dr. Priestley and Thomas Jefferson for the University of Virginia.
Oh, wow.
So, like, we've all, or most of us have experienced the American liberal arts curriculum.
Yeah.
And have been, educated under a Priestley Jefferson way.
Nice way to sum it all up, round it all up.
Is
Did he write anything about pizza? Priestley?
No, Priestley had very few teeth when he lived here. So he was eating a lot of puddings and maybe ice cream. And I actually went through some of the day books of the local store, and he's buying wafers. So you can imagine he's eating these English wafers, and he's gumming them up like an old person.
Yeah, just gumming the shit out of these wafers.
I mean...
It must be good wafers.
I don't like looking into British cuisine very much because, like, he's in a time frame where, like, they didn't have fridges. So when you killed poultry, you hung it up on the ceiling and
you got to cure it.
You left it cure for maybe a month. And without refrigeration, can you imagine what that chicken was like after about a month?
No.
I don't think I'd want to.
Not good, yeah.
If I was Priestley, I'd be eating pudding too. I would not be eating the chicken. Like
pudding 24/7.
But he's definitely an interesting character. You can, if you come into town, you can go to his house. People have seen people in the house when there's no one there, and you can go to his gravesite and maybe taunt him if you want to try to get his ghost to come out. But I really don't think he'll do it.
I like that you are definite that he doesn't have a ghost around here.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to say, yes, Priestley haunts this house, but I really don't think it was him. I just think he'd be morally against it. I think he was so stubborn that he would refuse to be a ghost.
That's pretty awesome. And then last question before we move on. Do you find yourself modeling after him?
Me, a little bit. I mean, I like how he's irrational. And like he considers himself a rational Christian. I look at the way he studied the Bible and took it apart as a very noble way to look at the beliefs. And I love the fact that he was very open. Unlike other religions, he was not closed-minded to other people's religions. He didn't think that government should have a role in that. He believed that everyone, regardless of their religion or even lack of religion.
Right.
I mean, imagine, he's really good friends with Benjamin Franklin, who is not known for being super religious, but he was accepting. And I really love that about who he is. So I think that's something that even in today's day and era is still something that should be strived for.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at Benjamin Franklin, and one of my favorite stories about him is that in Philadelphia, you would actually buy your pew at your church, and he bought the very back. He bought the very back pew, and
it's a good way to do it, I guess.
And people wondered. They're like, "Well, why did you buy the back pew?" And Franklin was so sympathetic to the pastor. He's like, "Well, I don't think it'd be nice if you had to hear me snore." So
That's awesome.
That endeared me more to Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah.
Than anything.
That's pretty funny.
But awesome. If there's anything else you have any questions on about Priestley, I can definitely answer them. But
yeah,
my brain feels pretty full.
on the paranormal stuff, I think I've hit most of the stuff on the Priestley House.
Very cool.
And I really do think that, like I said, I think if there's someone haunting it, it might be his wife, it might be his son. It might be Elizabeth, but the one person I don't think it is ever going to haunt it is Dr. Priestley.
That's awesome.
Dr. Priestley himself.
Well, our pizza place when we were in Nori was called, you'd never guess, Slice of Nori.
Yeah, that's just crazy.
How perfect.
I know.
It's like a perfect one for us. This is before we wrote a lot, so the descriptions are pretty weak. Yeah. This Slice of Nori is in Northumberland, Pennsylvania, and we did. We went in there and we got whole pie, right?
Mm-hmm. We did.
I think we got two, actually. One of each, pepperoni and cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm the pepperoni guy.
And we had a meeting in there, and they were really cool about it. They just let us do whatever they wanted. So
yeah, very cool.
Very nice people in there. It says for Steve, this is a high ranking for you, 4.5.
Yeah, you loved that pizza.
Done perfect was your answer.
Yeah.
Flavor was great. Nothing I didn't like about it, and you would definitely haunt. is what you said.
And I've been haunting it. I've actually ordered it 3 times since that visit.
Seriously?
Exactly. My wife, I wanted to try pizza, and she's like, I want to try the slice of nori. I'm like, you're going to love it. I was like...
She likes same kind of stuff you do?
Sometimes, yeah. Mm-hmm. She's mostly a Lucky Charms girl.
Oh.
She eats a lot of cereal and,
rock and roll.
you know, real health nut, you know. Cereal and ice cream. That's what she lives off of.
That's funny. Christy, you said 3.25 out of 5. So 3 1/4 slices. Good crust, a little too cheesy, and haunt. And that little too cheesy, you know, I don't like that.
Well, and I know because I am a cheese fan myself. So, like, for it to be a little too cheesy, it was a little too cheesy because I like cheese. I couldn't imagine if we got extra cheese on that thing. Like, that would have been really, really cheesy. But yeah, overall, 3.25 for me is a pretty good score.
Yeah, it's pretty high for you.
Because I'm not a huge pizza aficionado. I like it just as much as anyone, I guess, but I don't love it. It's not by any means my favorite food. So 3.25 is pretty good for me, actually.
Yeah, I agree. I did a 3.75, 3 3/4. It's like Star Search. I got shot back to my childhood there real quick. Now I'm also aging myself. Great taste and flavor. Staff was very accommodating for us, and I said I'd haunt that as well. Yeah, I really remember this pizza having they cooked it right there. It was fresh. Obviously, I love that, but it just had a nice taste to it. I think you know what I mean. Like they had the nice sauce and everything had a nice taste to it.
So that's a triple haunt.
It's a triple haunt.
Nice.
Obviously, and he's already haunted it triply for us.
I've triple haunted it already.
It's a triple.
So,
but I think that's about it. If you guys out there have had any experiences with Joseph Priestley, or if you have any questions or comments or anything like that for us, please email or comment on the video, or give us a like or subscribe on our podcast here, and
we might get back to you.
We'll do our best. Actually, it would be fun to read some on,
it would be really
on the air if we ever get to that point.
Yeah.
And I also still give tours on Sundays. So if you come to the Priestley House on a Saturday or Sunday, you can get a tour of the site.
From what time to what time?
From 1 o'clock to 4 p.m.
And does it cost anything?
It does. I think it's like $7.50 or something like that.
That's quite all right. You know, I went to the movies over the weekend, and for my friend and her 2 children and snacks, and this was at like $1.15, so it was the reduced price, $75.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, yeah.
What's
nuts.
crazy is the really nice ones. Like I went to this one that had like leather seats, reclined, heated seats, everything, and it was the same price. It was exactly the same price.
Yeah.
Like why don't they? Yeah.
Make them all nice.
Yeah. Why?
Well, because they can't afford to.
Well, that's why I like the campus theater, because you can go up there and sit on a couch.
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of different.
I mean, it's got a way cool vibe.
In Lewisburg. Well, if that's it, go ahead.
That's about it. Well, join us next time for a slice of the paranormal. You can see us on YouTube channel, or you can listen to us anywhere podcasts are found.
This podcast was produced by Stone State Entertainment.